Howdy, and welcome to the One-on-One Podcast. My name is Tucker. There is so much stuff going on in the NBA right now. Of course, for the content, I have to talk about the Lakers head coaching search, whatever is happening with whether it be JJ Redick, who was just calling a finals game last night, or Dan Hurley, of course. And we also need to talk about game one of the finals. Want to mention, by the way, moving forward, future episodes, I want to do a ton of stuff relating to y'all's comments. So if you want to leave a comment on this video, or if you're listening in the audio form, you can send me an email at theoneononepod@gmail.com. Want to make sure to get into mailbag questions from y'all every single episode. But we have to begin, of course, by talking about game one of the NBA Finals. Boston wins game one against Dallas in a game that, I'll be honest, I was disappointed by. It feels like we have gone, 2 months without basketball. We had all this discussion, all this conversation about how this series was going to go. Luka is the best player in the series. What is Kristaps Porzingis going to look like returning from injury? And then the game was quite frankly just terrible. Boston was up 29 at one point in the first half. Dallas made it interesting at one point in the second half. They cut it to 8 after a Luka 3. And then Boston basically goes on to win by over 20. Luka doesn't even finish the game. He gets pulled with 5 minutes to go in the game. And to say that I'm not concerned that any bit of meaningful basketball that we have is basically gone, I can't say that. Like, that is a real possibility. Boston is extremely good. I said this the entirety of the season. There's this weird thing happening right now. People going back and forth on whether I hate the Mavs, whether I like the Mavs. I picked Dallas in 6 before the series because I felt like Luka was just on this historic run. He's the best player in the series. I wasn't confident in what Kristaps Porzingis was going to look like coming into the series, and so I felt confident in Dallas. But I've also said the entirety of the season that if Kristaps Porzingis is healthy and the Celtics are making threes, they're going to win the title. I said that months ago, and people got mad at me because they were like, yeah, Tucker, of course, if the Celtics make their shots, they're going to win the title. That's the case with like literally every good team. If they make their shots, they're going to win the title. But for Boston, it's especially true because their volume from three-point range is out of control. And they win basically every single game when they shoot as many threes as they did last night. But the wild card for me, the reason that I didn't pick Boston in the series, the reason I picked Dallas in 6, which by the way is still possible. I know it doesn't look great after game one, but it is still possible, is because of Kristaps Porzingis. I did not think that he was going to be able to just show up to game one of the finals after not playing for a month and suddenly be really good for a couple of reasons. Obviously the injury stuff, but also, can we just remember for a second that this is Kristaps Porzingis? We were all clowning this guy 18 months ago, 24 months ago. He was the worst contract in the league in some people's estimation when he was on Dallas, when Dallas traded him away for, by the way, Spencer Dinwiddie and Davis Bertans. That's what they got in exchange for Kristaps Porzingis. It's not like this is a proven playoff player. It's not like this is someone that we're all expecting to put up great numbers in the finals. He hadn't played in over a month. So I was thinking, KP's probably not going to be that good in this series. He's going to be impactful at times, especially defensively. He's going to make some shots. But the idea that Kristaps Porzingis was going to come in and play as well as he did in game one was not really a possibility to me. And if he's going to play like that, we might as well just go ahead and go to the offseason. We might as well go and talk about the draft, talk about free agency, because if Kristaps Porzingis played like he did in game one, the series is over. And one of the reasons that I picked Dallas in the first place was because I didn't think we were going to get that version of Porzingis. And it is insane to me. It's crazy to think about and look back on what Boston was able to give up to get Kristaps Porzingis. They gave up basically Marcus Smart, and then they got back 2 firsts and Kristaps Porzingis, who now at certain points in the game last night looked like the best player on the team. And the concerning thing, if you're someone like me that just doesn't want the good, meaningful basketball to end, that is hoping for a long series, and obviously I picked Dallas in the series as well, is that there's a lot of ways that Boston could actually play better. Tatum and Brown, neither of them were incredibly impactful offensively. We're going to get to each of those guys here in a second, but there's still improvement to be made here for Boston. Of course, for Dallas as well. I mean, they can certainly play better, but I'm definitely concerned with how dominant the Celtics were in game one, given kind of where I thought the series was going to be coming into the series. Now, I want to talk about Jaylen Brown here for a second, because the $300 million man was someone that we all, just like Kristaps Porzingis, and we made fun of Jaylen Brown. He can't dribble with his left hand, getting paid way too much money. Why is he getting as much money as he is to be the second best player on the Celtics? And there's this thing that has happened with Jaylen Brown this year. And like in the past, he's been a good defender. Obviously, he's a really good athlete. But this year, he's taken on the actual challenge of like guarding the other team's best players, guarding Luka last night. And Luka was able to get his. They're going to switch a ton and all that stuff. But Jalen had a couple great blocks at the rim. He was awesome defensively in the conference finals as well. And I just want to give Jaylen Brown some credit because the idea of Jaylen Brown, the best version of him was always this really impactful two-way player. And it felt like the last few seasons, he leaned a little bit too much into the offense and to trying to be this great isolation player that's going to get to the mid-range and pull up from all these crazy angles. And Jaylen Brown's a really good offensive player, but the version that we see at times and saw at times last night where he's just guarding really well and is really efficient offensively, that is the guy that I think is especially scary and is able to be unleashed with the way this Boston team is put together, because you've got Kristaps Porzingis hitting every shot. You've, of course, got Tatum. You've got Drew Holiday. You've got Derek White hitting threes. You've got guys coming off the bench. Sam Hauser suddenly was hitting shots. Doesn't seem like he's hit a three in a month, and all of a sudden he was hitting shots last night. And as much as we make fun of Jaylen Brown, I've certainly made my fair share of can't dribble with his left hand jokes. He has been incredible and certainly really good in game one. I don't really know, honestly, what the leaderboard is right now for Boston in terms of finals MVP. Probably Kristaps Porzingis, honestly, with as good as he was in game one, but realistically, it's probably going to go to Tatum or Brown. It's going to be an interesting thing to pay attention to if the series is actually over, which, of course, it's not quite yet, right? There's still some hope here for Dallas. If you're a Mavs fan this morning, your hope is basically Porzingis isn't going to play as well as he did in game one the rest of the series, as well as Kyrie's going to play better, and you're going to hit more shots, and you're going to have both of your stars show up in a game in which Boston stars don't show up. That is your hope if you're Dallas. And coming into the series, my expectation was Luka and Kyrie were going to be awesome, despite how good Boston is defensively, and that was going to be their ticket. That was going to be their path to potentially winning the series. That hasn't happened yet, certainly in game one. And Kyrie was quite frankly terrible. He's turning the ball over, didn't shoot the ball well at all, and that's someone that I certainly expected to play well, given the fact that he has finals experience. That's going to have to turn around if you're Dallas. But one of the main kind of narratives for me, though, coming out of this game was there was so much conversation about who Boston played in the postseason leading up to the finals. The fact that everybody they played had someone missing due to injury. The fact that they still lost a game to the Heat despite all their injuries. The fact that a lot of those Pacers games were really, really close. And even though obviously they got the sweep, they didn't look particularly impressive in any one of those individual games. And there was so much conversation had about the path that they had to the finals. Arguably, and I've certainly made this point, the easiest path to the finals in the history of the league. That we didn't have as much conversation about who Dallas played, because I certainly thought that Dallas had an impressive run to the finals as a 5 seed. They beat the number 1 seed in Oklahoma City. They beat what at some point everybody thought was the best team in the conference in Minnesota, coming off of beating the defending champion Denver Nuggets in the second round. And now it's funny how quickly things can change after just one game. Now you're looking back at that and wondering, did we misevaluate who Dallas played? And more specifically, how those teams played offensively. Because if you go back to round one for Dallas against the Clippers, that was the only team that they played in the Western Conference that had multiple perimeter players that you were legitimately concerned about. Obviously, Kawhi didn't play for most of the series, but Paul George, James Harden, these guys are potent offensive players that you're concerned about. Round two against Oklahoma City, it was just SGA. Jalen Williams didn't play well. You don't have to guard Josh Giddey at all. And SGA was still able to get 2 games in that series because he's just that good. But there wasn't a lot that Dallas had to deal with outside of that defensively. And of course, they looked really impressive defensively. And then in the conference finals as well, it was Anthony Edwards. And then Karl Anthony Towns couldn't hit any shots. You had Rudy Gobert clogging up the paint. And Dallas was constantly able to use their size and their length to their advantage because they were in the paint all the time. And again, it's just one game. I'm not completely changing my opinion on who Dallas is or who they've been. But it does make me wonder if we overrated their run a little bit because these teams were so well suited to the way that Dallas wants to guard. And we certainly saw that in game one because they looked completely lost at times in terms of how to guard all the spacing and the 5 out and the driving lanes that Boston has out there with all their spacing, especially, of course, with Porzingis out there to still have a ton of size and length in addition to all this spacing. And having multiple options like that, having size like that, that appears to be a significant issue for Dallas. Now, they're going to make adjustments. There's other things they can do. They clearly were looking for answers after being down 29 in the first half. They played a ton of different guys, and I'd expect them to play much better defensively moving forward in the series. But it is distinctly possible that we overlooked how good Boston is, and we overlooked how potentially not necessarily easy the path was to the finals for Dallas, because certainly Boston's path was easier. And I still think that Minnesota is very good. You don't beat the defending champs on the road in Game 7 by accident. But maybe specifically to the play style of those teams, they suited what Dallas wanted to do defensively really well. And of course, a team like Oklahoma City, despite the fact they're one seed, was this very young team, the youngest team to ever win a title. And it's interesting as well to think about, or to ever win a title, ever win a playoff series, excuse me. It's interesting as well to think about how Dallas would have potentially matched up against that Nuggets team if they were able to beat Minnesota in Game 7. How that would have looked, how they would have guarded Jokic, obviously them having two offensive options in Jamal Murray and Nikola Jokic, and maybe giving that a little bit more of a preview of what they would potentially face against Boston in the finals. And I don't want to over-evaluate too much based off of just one game, but it certainly seems like there were things that we missed, or maybe more accurately that I missed, right? In terms of the way that Dallas wants to try and guard in this series. So moving forward, Kyrie's got to hit more shots. You got to hope that Porzingis does not play the way that he does, because if he's playing like that, they're the best team in the league, and it might not be particularly close. Like, they've lost 20 total games on the season. I think they're 77-20, including the postseason to this point. Boston's very good. That point was not lost on me. I just thought that Luka was the best player in the series, and I had concerns about Boston's late game offense. I had concerns about Tatum and Brown offensively in terms of them being able to score against this Dallas defense, and Luka just being this unstoppable force. And basically, I threw all the advanced numbers out the window. I threw the regular season matchups out the window, because neither of these teams looked even remotely the same to what they have been now to what they were in the regular season. Kyrie didn't play in all those games. The Celtics were resting guys some of those games. Of course, Dallas made additions after the trade deadline. I didn't really account for any of that stuff in my evaluation of the series. I basically felt like Luka's on this historic run. Dallas's role players are playing extremely well, and I thought the teams were decently close, and I was just going to take the best player in the series. And even though Luka was good last night, got his points, he certainly can be better at times. He looked like he was hobbling, maybe even a little bit injured, of course, is something that he's always been dealing with throughout the postseason. And then, obviously, I did not expect Kyrie to play as poorly as he did. So we shall see what happens the rest of the way between Boston and Dallas, but certainly an eye-opening Game 1 for me, and as someone that is just hoping we get some really good basketball moving forward, it is definitely a concern. We also, strictly for the content, we do have to talk about whatever is happening with the Lakers head coaching search. Now, I want to be careful here, because as of this recording, we don't know what's going to happen with the Lakers. And reportedly, Dan Hurley is going to meet with the LA Lakers today to discuss their head coaching opening. But there's just a lot to discuss here, because as of 36 hours ago, 48 hours ago, I even made a video about this on the main channel. I thought that JJ Redick was going to be the head coach of the Lakers. And I had all these conversations about how strange that was going to be for him to try and command respect within the locker room with clearly his professional connection to LeBron. Because not only, it's already a little bit of an issue when you're a former player and a younger guy and you're trying to kind of command respect. Even someone like Jason Kidd, who's in the finals now, had issues with that in his early days with the Nets. Steve Nash, certainly we saw issues with that with the Nets. That's still going to kind of be a problem for you. But even when you then add to the fact that you're literally the podcast co-host of the presumably best player on the team, or second best player on the team, depending on your evaluation of LeBron and Anthony Davis, and of course, whether LeBron would actually be on the team or not. And I just thought it was going to be weird. Like, it didn't even necessarily have anything to do with the head coaching ability of JJ Redick. It was just an impossible situation, in my opinion, for him to try and succeed, because it was clearly a LeBron move. It was clearly a LeBron orchestrated thing. And as of 36, 48 hours ago, we're getting a Shams tweet saying they're zeroing in on JJ Redick. He's the front runner. He's going to be the guy. We were getting these rumors for a couple of weeks, not just that they had, landed on JJ Redick and that was going to be their guy, but that he was kind of creeping towards the front of the line, and he was someone that they were certainly focusing on, and it seemed like that was the direction things were going in. I talked about this a couple of weeks ago, where I felt like it was basically a done deal, and JJ just wanted to call the finals first. And by the way, that's just another interesting point of all this with the finals, is that JJ Redick is calling the game last night, and there's been all these rumors. He's been on podcasts talking about, oh yeah, we'll see what happens with everything after the season, kind of tongue-in-cheek, basically appearing as though he is already accepted the job. And I just don't know how things could have changed so quickly in such a short period of time, and how there can be such a big disconnect between what Shams is saying and what he is reporting and what Woj is saying, which is kind of a little bit of a undercurrent as well throughout all this, is this little war we've got going on between Shams and Woj as well. Because if you go and read the article on ESPN from Woj, not only does he say Dan Hurley's going to be meeting with the Lakers, he seems to be the front runner, he seems to be someone that is very interested in the position, they're going to offer him this huge contract, basically pointing to it feels likely that it's going to get done. But he also says that from the beginning of the process, Dan Hurley has been the guy that they have targeted, which is in complete contrast to everything we've been hearing from a rumors perspective for at least a month now. Now, granted, a lot of that has been Shams driven and a lot of these other smaller reports. I don't think Woj has really reported on the Lakers head coaching situation a ton, maybe because he was sitting on this particular piece of info here. But I don't recall a single person discussing Dan Hurley as even a potential candidate for the Lakers head coaching position at any point until basically when I woke up yesterday. Like it was James Borrego, it was a handful of other guys, and it was JJ Redick. And the concept of Dan Hurley leaving UConn, becoming the Lakers head coach, was just not really discussed. And like I said, it's not finalized. It's not something we 100% know is going to happen. He's meeting with the team today, and there's certainly the possibility that this is all just and no disrespect to Dan Hurley for this. I'm all for it, but this is all just a way for him to get even more of a raise at UConn, leveraging this potential job offer from the Lakers, reportedly upwards of 12, 13, 14, $15 million potentially per season from the Lakers. He could take that, turn around and say, hey, I want this now to stay at UConn. And maybe that's what he's using this for, is as leverage. And at this point, I'm expecting anything to happen. Like things could turn back around and JJ Redick could be the head coach of the Lakers in a week. Dan Hurley could take the job. He could not take the job. And then JJ Redick's like, this is kind of weird now because I thought I had it and then I didn't. I'm just going to stay and call finals games and then where the Lakers stand. And not to mention, is this even a good idea? I think there's been so much kind of shock and surprise about the possibility of Dan Hurley as the head coach of the Lakers that people haven't really evaluated whether this is actually a good idea or not. Because my understanding, I'm not trying to tell you I'm an expert on UConn basketball, but my understanding of him and why he's been successful at UConn partially is he's kind of this old school head coach that he's going to yell and scream at guys. He's going to hold guys accountable. And it's obviously worked really well at UConn. His style, and one of the things that everybody has said has made him so successful, seems like it won't be very translatable to the NBA level. Like he seems like a guy that is a true college coach. It is used to being around younger guys. And the history of college coaches coming to the NBA and being successful is not all that great. I mean, obviously Brad Stevens was really good for Boston. But apart from that, like y'all remember when John Beilein was the head coach of the Cavs for like 9 months? We've had Rick Pitino, we've had Coach Cal, we've had all these guys over the years. Billy Donovan has stuck around with the Bulls, although I don't think anybody is necessarily saying that Billy Donovan has been a fantastic NBA coach. At the time that he left his college coaching job at Florida, he was on pace to be the winningest head coach in college basketball history, and he left that to go to the Bulls and just be kind of decent. The history of these college guys working in the NBA is just not there. And even if you think that Dan Hurley is the best head coach in college basketball, one of the reasons he's the best head coach in college basketball is probably not translatable at all to potential success at the NBA level. And that's not to say that he won't be successful. I mean, we've seen college coaches in certain circumstances be really, really well respected by NBA players. I mean, by all reports, Coach K was really well respected as the Team USA head coach. A lot of those guys really liked having him there. And I'm not saying that Dan Hurley is Coach K or anything, but there certainly is an outside possibility that this is a good hire for the Lakers. And 5 years from now, Hurley is one of the best head coaches in the NBA. And I would certainly argue that it's a better idea than hiring JJ Redick, especially if LeBron is on the team. But it just seems like a lot of the conversation is around, is this actually going to happen? Wow, this is shocking. How much money is he going to make? Is it actually a ploy to just return to UConn on a higher salary, without much discussion actually being had about whether this is a good idea, whether he's going to be a good head coach? And whether any of this stuff matters at all, like, are there just a handful of coaches in the NBA that actually matter, that are actually going to move the needle for you? And that no matter who the Lakers put in here, whether it was Frank Vogel before or Darvin Ham or who one of the, James Borrego, one of these other kind of recycled candidates, whether it was any one of those guys or Dan Hurley or JJ Redick, none of this stuff really matters. There's only a handful of coaches in the NBA that actually truly do matter. I don't know the answer to that necessarily, but it feels like a conversation that at least needs to be had. Now, as I'm recording this, it is 8:32 a.m. Eastern time. And I'm going to go out on a limb here and give myself a little bit of a prediction. I think Hurley is going to be the head coach of the Lakers. I think they're going to give him an amount of money that is just going to be basically impossible for him to turn down, especially with the way that the landscape of college basketball is changing, how difficult recruiting is becoming, having to deal with NIL. He has been very vocal about how much he dislikes these other coaches constantly trying to take his players, constantly trying to work on getting his players away in the transfer portal. As much as I think he likes coaching in college and likes, trying obviously to win more titles in college, being a college coach compared to a professional coach, really in any sport at this point, it seems to be something that a lot of these guys are moving away from. I think he's going to be the Lakers coach. I think he's going to make somewhere between $13 to $15 million a year. I think that's where the number is going to land because there have been all these reports about potentially doubling or tripling his salary at UConn and that being kind of what it would take in order to get him to leave. Honestly, at this point, like similar to the Tim Connolly thing in Minnesota, I would be surprised if they give him a piece of the ownership at this point. Like that's where we're at right now with some of the numbers we're getting to with Dan Hurley. That is my prediction. And like I said, they're supposed to be meeting with him today. So within a couple hours, if you're listening to this, I could be totally wrong. But honestly, one of the main reasons that is my prediction is apparently he's already had meetings with his UConn players and told them, hey, I'm having discussions with the Lakers. Like he's not trying to hide it. I respect that, by the way. I think that's really cool on his part because oftentimes, especially at the college level, there's just different rules for the adults compared to the young adults, and the coaches are allowed to jump prior to the transfer portal. The coaches are allowed to jump around to all these different jobs where the kids had to stay or they had to, miss a year in order to be able to transfer, and the rules are just different. And he's basically treating them as adults and saying, hey, this is real. It's business as usual right now. I might be the UConn head coach for 20 years, or I might be the UConn head coach for another 2 days. But that's where we're at. And so the fact that he's kind of having those discussions to me makes me think that this is very real. They're going to give him a ton of money. He's got his back-to-back national titles. He's accomplished a ton of stuff in college, arguably as much as he'd ever want to accomplish in college. And then he's just going to be the Lakers head coach. And then at that point, I will be incredibly interested to see how this goes because it's going to go one of two ways. He's either going to be awesome and 5 years from now, he's going to be one of those difference maker head coaches we were discussing earlier, or it's going to be the John Beilein experience all over again, where the guy is there for literally 9 months and is just completely irritating all the players because of his style and his mannerisms, the way that he talks to these players. He's used to being around all these college kids, and now you're dealing with almost 40-year-olds out there in the NBA. It's only going to go one of two ways for Hurley with the league. Now, like I said at the beginning, make sure you guys leave some comments. If you're watching this on YouTube, if you're listening on Spotify, Apple Podcast, the oneononepod@gmail.com. You guys have thoughts, you guys have something you want to talk about. I'd love to do some mailbag stuff every single episode here moving forward. The episodes are going to be longer here moving forward as well, but I just want to get this jump started. Going to try and get some guests going as well, and hopefully we get some more interesting games to talk about throughout the rest of the finals. And if not, then we'll be going into rumor season and an off-season season and trades and all this different stuff. I'm very excited for it. Thank you guys for tuning into the first episode. And yeah, I'll see y'all next time.